Welcome back, everyone. I think it's perfect timing that we're starting at 2 o'clock, and we have a really good panel here to discuss about generative AI, building generative AI responsibly. And we have a mixture of experts, not on the large language models, but you can see from the different brains we have from open source, we have from academia, and also from industry. So looking forward to this interesting talk, and I hand over to Patricia, our moderator here.
Thanks, Namrata. So let's set the scene to begin with. Generative AI is met with both enthusiasm and skepticism. Enthusiasm fueled by the idea of what is possible, the promise of pushing forward the frontiers of knowledge, advancing virtually all fields, from education to healthcare to entertainment. We live in a society where everything we do is increasingly mediated by technology and intertwined. Our communication with our loved ones, it has become instrumental in our jobs, and it is at the center of much of our leisure time. And these are only the very obvious, visible ones. In the past decade, we have examined at length the risks of ML and traditional AI. But technology has always been about trade-offs. Do the benefits outweigh the risks? When we say the systems are used for common good, what do we mean exactly? And who defines what is good? Granted, the exhaustive analysis has not been done, not that it is even possible to do it. In science, as in all areas in life, we must always work with uncertainty. Often, the solutions we devise are generative in itself, serving new purposes we couldn't envision, and giving birth also to new problems we couldn't think about ourselves. Generative AI is a quantitative but also qualitative jump in speed. Both the rapid adoption of the technology, the highest one we have ever seen, and the continuous technological breakthroughs have regulators scratching their heads, racing to understand, control, and guarantee its safety without hindering innovation. So how do we plan to tackle such a wide topic today? First, we know data used to feed the systems is not representative of our society at a global level. There's a huge geographical skew towards English-speaking countries and Western culture, very limited, narrow view of the world. Generative AI, as we know, produces new content, and the estimates of synthetic data are skyrocketing, soon taking over organically produced data. So will this technology help propagate this very narrow, one-dimensional view of the world? How do we ensure AI's model of the world is more accurate? That's the first point, right? The ingredients that this technology needs. And the second, let's assume we can achieve this perfect modeling. Do we want these systems to reflect our own biased views as flawed humans? There isn't a single universal conception of right and wrong. How do we embed moral judgments in these autonomous systems? Do we want to limit decision-making maybe to the human in the loop, the one who would be accountable for it? What's clear to me is context is essential to make better decisions, and right now the conversation is taking place in silos. So it is my great pleasure today to moderate this panel of experts across industry, academia, and regulation. To my left, we have María Grandury. She's an ML research engineer focused on responsible, inclusive, open source AI systems, especially in Spanish. She's the founder of Somos NLP, an international community that aims to give Spanish a fair representation in AI by promoting the creation of open resources. She's also a Hugging Face Fellow and has participated in several international NLP research projects and developed explainability models and adversarial attacks to assess the security of machine learning systems. Next, we have Dr. Anikó, Hannák, assistant professor at the Computer Science Department of the University of Zurich. Her research focuses on the co-evolution of online systems and their users, in particular large content-serving websites such as search engines, online stores, freelance marketplaces. Anikó has also created a methodology called algorithmic auditing, which tries to uncover the potential negative impacts of such large online systems. Next, we have Ayisha Piotti. She's the managing partner at Rec Horizon and head of Switzerland's largest global AI policy discussion platform, the annual AI Policy Summit at ETH Zurich. In addition, she's a member of the advisory board and ethics council of Eightfold AI in California. She's also part of the ITU UNESCO Expert Committee on AI Capacity Building, expert contributor on digital and AI leadership at the AI Business School in Switzerland, and board member and co-founder of the Swiss LSE Alumni and Alumni Foundation. And finally, we have Dr. Naya Giannakopoulou. She's a technical leader in the field of data and AI, currently working as a senior technical architect at Microsoft Technology Center in Zurich, Switzerland. She leads workshops with customers and partners from envisioning to prototyping, bridging the gap between business requirements and technical implementation. Naya is also an advocate for responsible AI practices and the implementation, tangible implementation of AI and LLM, in particular workloads, in a scalable and responsible way. Her career has spanned big tech, IT consulting, fintech, and academia research. So as you can see, we have gathered many different points of view. Let's kick it off. I would like to open with a question to all of you to frame the discussion. Could you share one of your biggest hopes and biggest fears in the wave of AI, this Gen AI disruption we are living? We can do it in order, if you wish.
Sure. So today we have, like most of the speakers have already talked about you two, the cool kid. So there's Gen AI, but actually Gen AI has been around for more than, like 1 year and a half, which is what we know it, because really ChatGPT is what democratized its use, and also it's like improved its awareness, and also bring to the people the discussion about all these fears, which I think sometimes are also driven by the fear of unknown and not really understanding when it's happening. I think the worst fear I have is exactly what you were also talking about. It's like this perpetuation and amplification of the biases that we already have as a society, and then we're just like putting all this garbage in the model and then getting garbage out. I'm sure you've all heard that sentence. I think instead of a lot of like catastrophizing about future risks, we should really focus on the current ones we have, which are this bias, climate impact, which we also talk about today, and copyright. A lot of big topics. I'm sorry. Okay, so those are my fears. Let's focus on this bias perpetuation. And so my hope is also very related to that. So I think we can use AI to mitigate that gap, because it can help us transform text that, for example, is in one language to the other ones, so we can, share content or knowledge more easily. So accessibility would be my hope.
Okay, so surprisingly, I'm coming at this from a very similar perspective. I'll start with my fears. Basically, this question was a really nice mirror for me on how I can't really dig up any positive feelings about it. Good. But anyways, so I'm also someone who has been studying inequality due to algorithms for quite a long time already. So for me, it's all about the amplification as well, but maybe also the additional effect of not being able to explain or detect things and accountability related to that. But since you already mentioned that, I guess one thing that I'm worried about, and maybe the relationship is not so direct or clear, is kind of this, what it does to our attention, like more and more recommendation systems and tailored content, and kind of companies trying to win more and more of your attention, like what that does to humans basically on a daily basis. In terms of my hopes, I think my hope is that somehow this will break the internet. We'll create a better one that is more human curated and nicer. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, thank you so much. I'd like to just thank for this great invitation that I've had to the organizers. I've really, really enjoyed the session so far. The passion and the competence that I've seen in this room is just mind-blowing. So wonderful. It's my first time, and I hope to be part of this community going forward as well. Now, coming back to your question, in terms of hope, I think for me, AI definitely is, for me, a tool for the betterment of society. I think for me that's clear. It is leading to a lot of efficiency gains, productivity gains, and I think one of the things is that whilst we can actually avail those gains in the global north, I would actually like to see that we can also have AI help the global south in terms of real issues that need to be solved. So be it access to education, be it health, be it climate change. And here the point I'd like to make is what is important is to make sure that we can distribute the gains coming from this particular tool, I would say, or technology broadly and equitably. So that's the first thing in terms of my hope, and I hope that we can do that. In terms of fear, I think we have heard now in the morning, but also just now, with regards to many concerns, of course, that we have regarding this technology, be it sort of copyright, be it biases, privacy. The one that worries me quite a lot is that today it is something which can lead to a large-scale misinformation in society, right? And that is, of course, we talked about hallucinations, but we also have deep fakes. And my fear is that if we do not tackle these bigger implications, we will lose the trust in this technology. And if we lose the trust in the technology, we might lose its adoption as well, which I think is not good for any of us. Coming back again, because I do think it's something which can do so much good for us. And the other one where I am slightly worried again with that particular topic is about manipulation of citizens, which you see now, with when we're looking at elections happening as well. So we have to make sure that that is something that we are keeping a check on. And of course, there are many ways to do that, but we can discuss that later. Thank you.
Hello from my side as well. I would say, we first have to acknowledge that we live in a very interesting era, right? I mean, having OpenAI giving access both programmatically and with such a friendly user interface to everyone, it really showed all these possibilities and it changed the way people interact with AI systems. I'll start with the fear, so we close with a positive note. For me, of course, I agree with everything you said. I would say a big fear of mine is that we still don't know how these models work really, right? We don't know how they encode knowledge, how they think. And the fact that at the moment academia does not have the resources to work on those, and it's mostly big tech companies, including the one I'm working on, it's something we need to address. It's just not healthy for researchers not having access to supercomputers to work on. So that's one thing. The other thing is that these systems are, let's say the APIs are already there and companies have started working with them. But going more to the hope side is that working with customers and within Microsoft I work with, I see that AI governance is top of mind. So for me, that gives me a hope that we do build, we want to build, there is intention to build reliable and trustworthy AI systems and be transparent with the end users. So, yeah.
Thanks so much for the overview. I think I want to pick up on, to begin with, on the evolution from traditional ML, other AI systems before Gen AI kind of catalyzed this massive acceleration. Because we are not starting from scratch, right? There's a lot of work that has been done. And I think one important element is to say, hey, let's look at what has worked, what didn't work in the past, which structures we can reuse in terms of collaboration across industry, academia, also the role of regulation. And let's take these learnings and see what we can do incrementally. Because one thing is for sure, the pace is not slowing down anytime soon. So we need to take, not start from scratch every time, right? So I don't know who would like to take on their view. on this. I think, Anikó, Maria, you can talk a bit about your experience.
It's going to be hard for me to say what has worked, but there's definitely exactly. No, sorry. I just so I think, just because I think the direction is really good, what's happening, the collaboration between policymakers and academia, but I still feel like we're sort of always trying to catch up, and I don't know, maybe you know more about it.
Well, I'm sort of living and breathing this topic, so I can say a few words about it. So I mean, first of all, I think I must say that governance of a technology like artificial intelligence is a true global challenge we have today, right? And it's not about, should we be or should we not be, because we all kind of somehow agree that we should have some red lines that we should have as society. And, you've had places like UNESCO that came up with, 193 countries which signed the principles that we should be following when we're developing and deployment AI. So there's guidance that exists. I think where it's not so much clear is how we go about it. Right. And today I would say that we should not also feel that nothing has been done. There is a lot of work, and specifically with the launch of ChatGPT. I think one of the good things with that was that it brought this topic to forth. And if you actually listen carefully to Sam Altman, I mean, one of the reasons why ChatGPT was launched to the world was also to bring this topic forward, which is to say, why don't we have input from society on how we should go about regulating or governing this technology, right? And today what we see is, specifically in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of movement. I mean, when I started, let's say 5-6 years ago, people used to look at me like, what the hell is she working on? When nobody cares about this, right? It's all about capturing the benefits. But now, as you see, when you look at the G7, in the political level as well, you look at the United Nations, you lead the G20, you see the OECD, you see, for example, various governments. So we have had the United States with an executive order, EU with their legislation. We have the Switzerland today. We are also reflecting on how to move forward, and we have to give something to our Federal Council by the end of this year. So a lot of movement there, right? Now, of course, I think coming back to the something you mentioned was about the inclusion part of it, right? So I think one of the things which still remains is how are we going to do it to ensure that all the voices are heard? And today, maybe that's an area that we have to do better in. And that's something that personally I'm very involved in, and we'll talk about it later as well.
Yeah, so you were saying that the evolution, right, like more at the technical level, I think you wanted. So as I said at the beginning, Gen AI is not really new, and we have more examples of generative applications or tools that went wrong. So we had this chatbot that became racist. We have a very also popular, that was a face recognition algorithm that also there's a Netflix TV show about it, Coded Bias. Also, at the end of last year, there was a study about Midjourney having a super stereotypical point of view of the world because basically, all the very stereotypical. I'm not going to give examples of stereotypes. So I think in most of these examples were wrong. It's all the time about how little diversity there was in the data. And so the solution is also something you said in the intro, just having diverse data sets that represent the world, but not only the world as it is right now, but also as we would like it to be, so even more fair than what we have right now, because we could definitely benefit from some improvement.
Can I just quickly add something?
Yes, of course.
Just a little bit related to my research. So basically what I've been working on for a long time is the stage of fixing problems where you actually first have to discover them. And so this is where this algorithm auditing comes in. So very often we have online platforms or algorithmic systems where we don't even know yet what the problems might be with them. And so you first have to go and investigate them. And as you pointed out, like academics very often don't actually get access to these systems. So you have to be kind of creative or hacky to come up with a way to externally examine these systems. And weirdly, what has worked for me personally or for my research group and researchers around me is to kind of try to get around the systems and try to find the problems and then call it out in like media or approach the companies. Most of the time when you approach the companies, you don't meet open arms. But once you call it out in media, that's when actually regulators can step in, or that's when the companies are actually motivated to change it. So it's sort of this like backdoor process, but this is what worked for us.
Yeah, but I think with AI permeating virtually all industries, and as I said before, almost all areas of our life, it needs to have such an approach. So in the same way we have the legal system, which is not binary, right, where you need to assess each specific situation, context is very relevant. We are moving towards a similar approach, I would say, for AI, going to Ayisha's point. And then to your point, Maria and Anikó, there is this imbalance in terms of access to resources. So I'm thinking access to data, access to compute, right, access to experts even, so that the different actors, industry, academia, regulators, can actually work together, right? And here I would love to hear your opinion as well, Ayisha, on how to bridge this, right, in the current global discussions.
Yeah, so I think it's just following up just what you said with regards to this identification of issues, right? Because it's such a fast. So if we sort of think that the policymakers, there are people like us, they don't necessarily know all of that, right? And we do start to see now some good examples. So one country that's doing this very well is Singapore, right? Where what they're saying is, look, we are not going to come up with legislation because we as legislators don't really know how we have to legislate. But we should work together with the industry, with the civil society, but set up a platform in which we can have a dialogue. And part of that dialogue is actually the bigger companies and the startups even helping us identify what the issues are, right? So the Singapore government has got these platforms where, they work together with the scientists, with the academia, with the governments, where they come back with and say, okay, these are the issues. Then what they say is, based on that, let's have some guidelines that we can issue. So that's a very good example of working together and ensuring that we have a platform where we can do that. Of course, apart from that, I think that today there's more and more emphasis on this multi-stakeholder inclusion. Right? I think in Switzerland we are doing a good job again because we have a direct democracy. We have sort of in our DNA that we consult. And we have platforms already here for things like I can think about tripartite, which is run by the Office of Communication. But I do think there's more that needs to be done. And when we look at it, there are two levels of inclusion which are not there. One is with regards to, maybe in the policy discussions, we do see the bigger companies having a bigger voice. So we have to think about how we can have resources and things also for like SMEs, and which is important for us, as well as academia, how we can incentivize them to come and talk. And the other is geographically, right? So one of the biggest problem that's happening, there was a study that was conducted. We looked at where exactly are some of these ideas of regulation coming from. And what you realize when you put it on the map, big part of the world is nowhere to be seen. So you don't see Latin America or Africa or basically Central America. So we need to make sure, and then coming back to a presentation we had just earlier on climate change and all that, some of these great solutions that we are doing. Some of these policies that are being made, we need to make sure that we harmonize some of those benefits. And there, I think the UN now, they have this UN Digital Compact, which is something the Secretary General has mandated, and we're going to have some results coming out in September of this year, which one of the mandates is also to ensure that we have inclusivity and we strive to. So, United Nations, as some of you might know, cannot necessarily make any laws, right? They are not a law-making body, but they are somebody who can help in bringing these different players together. And then, of course, at every country level, you have to think about it as well. And I think, I don't want to take all the space, but we are doing quite a few things in Switzerland.
So you think there will be a global policy probably, or global high-level guidelines?
No, what I think, guidelines are there. So, 2 years ago, we had UNESCO, basically 193 countries said this is the principles. We were OECD before that came in 2018 as well. But one of the things which is becoming very clear is you will never see a harmonized global regulation on AI. And this is basically the reason is that culture is different, history is different, priorities are different. And just when you started, you talked about trade-offs in society. Each society, what privacy means for a European maybe is not what it means from an Indian or for a Chinese, right? So when you are trying to make a regulation, maybe some country will say, well, for my ecosystem, I can kind of trade a little bit of privacy versus maybe competition and so on and so forth, in each society. So what will really happen is, I think we have to come up with some red lines, that's for sure, where we will say, this is a place we don't go. So, like Dolly the sheep, when she came, where we said as humans, we are not going to clone humans, right? So there are certain things where we're looking at saying globally, they could be something that we could go towards. But ultimately, how each and every, regional or local, jurisdiction is going to look at policy will depend on individual preferences, individual history, individual trade-offs, which we need to decide. And the only thing I would say is that in order to discuss those in the policy circles, we absolutely need, input from everybody. Otherwise, what happens is, again, the trade-offs are for smaller people, and then they are the ones that get the voice. So,
absolutely. Thanks so much. For your overview, I would say we can link now with the more practical aspects, because in general, I would say for the last year, there have been always in all events related to data or AI, a lot of focus on responsible AI. I would say even a few years back, there was emphasis in, hey, how do we define certain protected attributes, and then we detect bias with a certain set of algorithms and then mitigate this bias, and suddenly the model is unbiased, right? I think we have moved past that naive vision. And now with the wider purpose of generative AI models, we cannot no longer adopt the same approach. So I would like to continue with the discussion on the learnings that we draw from existing ML systems, and now expanding them for Gen AI. And one of the topics, because I think here we have really an excellent panel for this, is open versus closed. And I would like just to scope it to data. There's a lot of interest around data economy, making available high-quality data that is representative. So this first aspect of models having the ingredients, the data, to create an accurate representation of the world. And then the model themselves, so picking and really looking under your hood, what is the model doing? And I know with Gen AI, we don't have all the answers, as Naya has also alluded to, right? There is still a bit of a mystery, but where are we at today, from your perspective?
Okay. Where are we? I think where we are in general in this, in the AI level where we are, is really thanks to open source, because in the last, let's say even 10 years, the development has been rapidly evolving. And the good thing about open source is that if I do some kind of research today and I put it on some hub, or on archive the paper, then tomorrow already can be working on it and rapidly evolving. So this is also how why this is a collaborative field, and which is why it's going so fast. I think, so yeah, with respect to where we are in data, usually what we have is, there's true that we have more and more open data, but it's usually coming from the west coast of the US. And there has been also recently some studies about actually like an initiative 2 weeks ago from Cohere for AI and Argila to annotate the Western culture biases in one of the data sets that is widely used to evaluate LLMs, which is MMLU, just in case someone knows it. And it's very important to actually like bring to the media, as you were saying, or just like to the public these discussions, because then if we're using those very biased data sets to evaluate our models, or not even just to train them, but also to evaluate them, compare them, yeah, this also affects a lot, like how the field is evolving. And there's a lot of people, so I can also let someone else explain.
Maybe I can add a couple of comments. I think it would also be beneficial when a new, let's say, foundation model or other LLM type of models are made available to the public to share what data they've been trained on. I think we also need that type of transparency because then, you know, we can learn from that and think of different patterns, how to make them better or more specialized. I think we can do more on that space, for example. I think at the part of, you know, creating an open source community and sharing, I think we're doing good there. I agree with you. I think there is momentum. People want to share findings, they share models, and even at the enterprise level, there are platforms that you can make use of such models, right? So I think we are doing, things are getting better there. But I think on the data that's being used, this is not so transparent. And also, as these models expand, because there is a bit of a debate, right? There are some that they want to brute force and say, you know, throw more models, throw more power and make it bigger. And there is now another part that they say, no, should we go more specialized, more? So if we think up the brute force with more data, then the question is, what data will be used, right? Will we know what data will be used? And if we think, I don't know, social media, what type of data we can take on? Will we give our consent? How transparent is the whole data exchange going to be? For me, that's a question there.
You know, if I can just, you know, share some interesting example of what's happening in Switzerland as well, and some other countries now are looking at this whole exact topic because, as you rightfully said, data, you know, is extremely important. If you train it on, let's say, health, you know, if you train it in global north and then you're using it in Africa for something, it just doesn't work, right? So we've got to, but the problem normally is that essentially what you'd love to have is local data, train it on local data for the local, you know. But the issue there is compute, right, and resources. So in order for you to be able to do that in those places, you need to have the right compute, the right resources, and the right people. So Switzerland is actually recently launched, and it was announced in Davos, this new initiative where they have said, okay, we are, you know, the government is going to be giving, and then ETH is part of it as well. It's called ICANN initiative, where the compute capacity is going to come from, you know, a center generated in Lugano. We are going to get, you know, input and data from a partner in Africa. And then we are going to get expertise from Germany, for example, to build this open source model, which is then going to help with, you know, making AI, shall we say, more sovereign in a way and more open. So I think, and my understanding is there are many other countries as well, you know, Malaysia, some others that are actually starting to look at that particular issue. So on the one hand, I totally agree that open source is the way to go. I think we have to think about not just data, but also compute and the resources that come to it, and definitely there has to be focus on that particular topic in order for us to really capture. Last thing, again, because I talk about policy, is to say, you know, we also need to maybe think about, and that I would love to hear from all of you who, of course, understand technology so well, Are there actually any risks to open source as well for us as citizens? And if so, what should we be doing about that?
Yes, it's a very interesting discussion, I think, of power, right? Looking at the different layers, what makes possible an AI system, looking at the hardware, looking at the energy consumption, then the data, the modeling, and the skill set you need to create a good model, and then I like the EU Act, how it defines AI systems. We are also, as users, part of the AI system. So how do we contribute our feedback? How do we close the loop? And this, I think, goes back to the actually one of the most voted questions we have from the public, which is, okay, so what kind of profiles do we need to contribute to responsible AI? How can we do it at an individual level and at an organizational level? And this can be your employer, but it can also be an organization like Women in Data Science or others, right? I think we need to attack this problem from different angles, right? So I would like to open the discussion about this. Yeah, Anikó?
Just because you mentioned many angles, I feel like one thing that wasn't covered before is maybe the side of the users. What do we actually need to tell users? How do we need to educate about using generative AI? And I'm not trying to say that it's up to the user to keep themselves safe, because that's not possible. But that's sort of a starting point too, like to explain to users somehow, like, what is it, how to use it. And I'm saying this because I'm particularly worried in my research about how people gather information, and I don't only mean misinformation, though that's also there, but really like the accuracy of what you get from generative AI versus search. And I do see that a lot of people just completely, they just use it differently than what it was meant for, and
Yes. Yeah, I think this is an excellent point, and it has been mentioned in the talk before about misinformation, right? So, and I think for me, this is an interesting angle to transparency, because if you look at our life in general, there are many aspects of our life that have been sort of pushed down to us, like this self-service concept. And there is a tendency of, hey, here's all the information. You have an information overload, but you have everything, and now you make the decision, right? And it's simply not feasible to put that pressure on the individual, right? There need to be some minimal guidelines, plus the transparency. So I think you should be able to check, but there should be already in the systems, they should be built with a certain well-being in mind, which many of them we can argue today they are not, right? Profit is normally the main KPI we go for and we optimize for.
So just coming back to that responsible AI, right? Let's just break that down. What do we really mean, and what does, because of course that then tells us who needs to be involved and how we should go about it. So I think it was summarized very well with Michelle just earlier on this morning, where she talked about, you know, if you really want to build trust, you have to think about, you talked about data, you talked about transparency, you talked about human oversight. I would add to that two more things. One is accountability, and the two is inclusion and involvement. So if you know, just to take an example of something that works well and is responsible. So when you take all of these, it will help you, and put yourself in the shoes of either a business leader or a policymaker or just a citizen. It will help you to identify exactly where you can come in, right? And each of us can actually contribute. I'm a big believer in that you have to absolutely have, you know, as a parent, it's touching us today, this technology. As a consumer, it's touching us today. As a citizen, it's touching us today. As a, you know, creator of technology, it's touching us today. So when we look at responsible AI and we look at it in terms of building trust, and we see these different silos, I am sure each of us can actually say where we can contribute. Then, of course, one of the bigger questions becomes, but how do we do that, and what kind of, you know, platforms are there for me to actually be part of? And I think this is places where we do need to build that awareness. We do need to inform people where they can go if they want to be engaged. I mean, I will talk about it later in a small group. But the fact of the matter is, I also believe that policy, which is where the governments have to play a role in there as well, to bring together, to a certain extent, all these different players. And that does need, because it's easy to say, let's just have everybody in there, but, you know, even organizing something like that requires some effort, some energy, some resources, and some money. So I think we do need, as a society, to move towards that. And part of it is to make sure that we understand the sense of urgency, and then we say, well, this needs to be done, and we want to open it up to the rest of the world. Because, you know, I said that before as well, innovation is not thriving in the silos. It's only thriving when you're making those connections. And to make those connections, you have to be in places where you can actually interact with the others. And I think policymakers have to make that one of the priorities, and that's something we are also trying to do in Switzerland.
And so I think that is all very true, and I agree. But also coming back to the question of what do we need, I think we don't need to be policymakers to actually make some change and like try to build more diverse systems. Like, it doesn't matter in which point of an AI project you are, there's always place to say, like, hey, I think this is biased, or hey, I think, did you think about this, or hey, and the best way of just having this is having a diverse team, because with different background experiences, you're going to be more, you know, like more attentive to one type of bias or another one, the one that's usually closer to you, which makes a lot of sense. So that's why we need diverse teams. And also, I think also like a kind of motivation. So I think since AI is such a vast field, there are a lot of places where we need more initiatives. It can be either from a societal point of view, from a linguistic point of view. For example, in my case, when I created the nonprofit that is now Somos NLP, it was just because I didn't found Spanish resources to create a project. And now it's grown to become an amazing community. So I'm not saying go create another community, but you can maybe just like also organize a meetup, or hey, like, yeah, whatever. So like you can also have an impact, I think.
And I think this tackles one of the fears you almost anonymously mentioned, which is the perpetuation of the biases, right? In your case, you took initiative directly as an open source project or community-based project to create content that reflects the certain language, right? So I think this is quite a powerful message that you can start and make a change for a problem you identify. In terms of operationalizing and really implementing responsible AI in the industry, what are we doing today? Do companies feel they have strong internal guidelines? Is there a process, or it's still very fuzzy and undefined?
Maybe I can say a couple of words on that. I would say if we, and this goes back to your previous question, right? What lessons learned we have from operationalizing ML workloads, or more traditional, if you like, data science workloads, and now moving to, you know, LLM-based applications. I think the unprecedented speed of development has also brought quite fast metrics for evaluating such models. So to give you an example, with the launch of GPT-4, we created a service that's called Content Safety, and it actually annotates content output from an LLM application, and you can evaluate whether the content is grounded to the data. Let's say if you have a RAG application. So there are metrics now that you can put in pipelines, similar to what you would build with other ML pipelines you would normally build. So there are metrics that companies use when they try to operationalize these models. However, not everything is clear, and these metrics might not be enough. So continuous monitoring, continuous, of such system is very important. So I would say in general, companies put governance around that with the tools they have, but they need to expand. but it looks good, I would say. There are models.
Can I ask you something
Of
about
course.
that? So
Yeah.
one thing I'm worried about often is small companies, because what I see in my research is that very small companies can have very big impact. So
Fair point.
somehow this is not. So for example, like the freelancing platforms or job platforms that I'm looking at, they have giant impact on the labor market, and these are super simple websites put up by 3 guys in a basement. And they don't really realize the impact, and they also don't have the resources for this kind of monitoring. So I'm just wondering.
No, that is a very fair comment, to be honest. Indeed, the companies I had in mind are much bigger scale and in maturity. So indeed, I would say as you become more elaborate, if the company does not have the maturity, then yes, I agree with you.
I mean, I would tend to agree with both of you, because I think there is a differentiation we have to know about big and small companies, right? And in terms of bigger companies, I do feel today there is a lot of internal governance that is being put in place, because there is a reputational risk. It's normal, right? If something goes wrong, your stock price is going to be hit, and you need to be careful, and therefore you also have resources, so you're doing that. So I think one of the messages and the third thing I see the bigger companies doing very well is also building that bridge with the policymakers. But then that's a good thing, because at some point, I mean, it was incredible to hear some of the technical solutions which are coming up. I think we were talking about the RAG solution for hallucinations. We were talking about the scalable oversight. I mean, this is fantastic, because you use technology itself to really help the policymakers and help. So that's one thing. But I completely agree with you, because when it comes to the smaller companies, they are not necessarily on that table, and they are not necessarily having the awareness. But then again, there have been many discussions on that. And the fact of the matter is that one of the main core of innovation is, let's do something which is beyond the norm. We have to come back. We're not necessarily going to follow the big rules. We are going to come with breaking some of the ways things are done. And that's by nature of it, the smaller companies are going to be, doing those things. Again, that then comes back to the overall policy that the government is going to take in place, and what can they do to proactively help these smaller companies who necessarily are just looking at a very short-term horizon to kind of make money and sales and don't have them. Then you have to have another intervention where we're going to have to, inform them about the, ethics by design, as well as help them to understand the maze of legislation. Because one of the biggest problems with having regulation, which is hard law, is sometimes it locks out the small companies. And when we had the GDPR that was put in place, when you did an analysis, you realized that the bigger companies had bigger share, and the smaller companies were moving out because they couldn't keep the burden. So we do need them, right? There is this but who is going to do it? And the question is, and I think that's where, but when you say policymakers, who are the policymakers? It has to be our voices that go to the policymakers, right? So everybody has a role in there. They're not just going to come from the top and do something. So specifically in democratic societies like ours.
Thank you very much. So we have come to the end of the panel. We have eaten into some of the time for coffee break, but I would like to give 30 seconds to every one of you. No, it's tight, but to try and share with the attendees here which kind of skill set you're missing in your view of AI. So in the field, in the environment you're working, what would be the skill set or the other stakeholder that is missing, right? Because what we have concluded is we need everyone, small company, big company, they're bringing different things to the table, research, policy. So what is one thing you're missing in your current work? We can do it also in order.
That's not
you want we can do it the other way around.
I don't know, that's a difficult question. It's quite abstract, I would say, at least for my role. It depends, I would say, because, okay, I have to be 30 seconds. So I would say it depends, right? When you build an AI system, this is intended for a specific use. It probably has a business context. So I would say a big part is the subject matter expert regarding the to have this solution in context to what we will be used for. Because then you can reverse engineer based on who is your end user and go back to all the requirements that you need to build your AI system on. So I would say this type of persona is very, very important when you build AI systems, and we shouldn't omit. Yeah.
Well, my work by virtue is actually trying to bring together all the players. So I wouldn't say that I'm missing specific, because I every day endeavor to get more and more people from different parts of the world to participate. I would say I would more go to, instead of who is missing, what is missing. And I do think there's a sense of urgency that's a little bit missing, which we need to kind of, I would love everybody to start to have. And again, when you think about sense of urgency, think of yourself not only in your job, but as a human being, as a citizen, as a parent, as a, think of that sense of urgency. That's what I had when I came into this field, because I'm a mother of twins and I thought about their future. So I do think that we need to have that sense of urgency. And once we have that, we will know which way to go, be it to our local politician, be it to our boss, be it to our academic supervisor, or be it to our policymaker. So that's what I would love to share.
Thank you.
So within my little research environment, I'm actually in this interdisciplinary space. So I would say I also don't miss any specific skill sets. I think what I would love to have is more people on the company side who are kind of ready to experiment and exchange involving us. That would be nice.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go for the soft skills. So I would say communication, because if we want multidisciplinary teams, we also need people that know how to communicate, and also with different technical levels. And also going back a bit to the fears, and that if we are in this field, we have actually a big impact, doesn't matter the role in the world. So we should also know how to communicate what we're doing to the people that is outside the field. So yeah, communication.
Yes, yes. And I couldn't agree more. To summarize your inputs, I would say we need everyone at the table, no matter your field, no matter your level of technical expertise. Sometimes people approach us and say, oh, I don't know if I can attend the conference, right? Because I haven't studied data science. Yes, we need you, right? We need the SMEs. We need people that are willing to communicate, to take active action and discuss. And we need people from all sorts of work environments, big, small. So please use the opportunity at the conference to talk to people. And if you want to take action, just say it. You'll be surprised how many more are willing to join you. So thanks so much.
Thank you.